Do you think Kashtira will play Bystials to banish their Rysard if it gets outed? I think that is very, very niche. I think if you play Bystials, it's only because they're good in the format, not because you can banish your own Rysard after it gets outed. Like when you play a card that becomes live in a turn 3 scenario, you're not going to play it for that reason. Very simple. But that's a very good segue, because one thing I wanted to do today is talk about the situation of hand traps and board breakers and how they change in this new upcoming format, right? Because these last couple of weeks where everyone was kind of anonymously agreeing that we were in a hand trap format, right? Everyone was playing Droll and Lockbird, a lot of Gamma, even cards like Ghost Ogre found their way back into the main decks because people were scared of Super Heavy Samurai, and it was kind of like a deal where hand traps are really good and necessary against Super Heavy Samurai, and they're like decent into the other decks, right? However, now in this new format where Super Heavy Samurai really got the axe with the Link 1 being banned, we're basically looking at an entirely new situation, and I think that's why it's the perfect timing to renew these tier lists. So we're gonna go over the situation of hand traps and also board breakers. Keep in mind that this is just my first impression of the format. I don't know exactly what the format is going to look like. I don't really have the ability to completely predict what everyone is going to play, but I still think we can go off of what we have and what we think is popular and just how I would approach it personally, because we have big nationals coming up. This weekend is French nationals, the week after is German nationals. After those tournaments, we're gonna know better what to expect, but for now, we're just gonna go off of my first impression. So let's just go one by one. I think Ash Blossom is a very good card in this upcoming format. If you want to play hand traps, I think Ash Blossom is one of the first ones you play. I don't think the card is completely insane, but just the fact that Branded didn't get hit on the ban list at all, really. Ash was really bad against Super Heavy Samurai, and that deck is now gone. Ash was also mediocre against Kashtira, and that deck got weaker. Honestly, with Unicorn going to 2, Ash is actually a bit better against Kashtira now, because they are less likely to just open Unicorn. So if you just Ash the field spell, they're less likely to have a backup Unicorn, or if you Ash Theosis on Fenrir, they're less likely to have a Unicorn access. So like Ash becomes a little bit better. It's pretty good against Labyrinth too, which is also one of the big winners of the ban list. The one deck that it's not very good against is Runic Sprite Variations. Yes, you can Ash against that deck, but they usually play through it, but it's not terrible still. There's no deck where Ash is not great, but it is pretty good against some of the looking to be top decks. So I think Ash is safe to say that it will be a good hand trap / very good hand trap in the new format. Bell is another very interesting one, because I think Bell has always been this kind of situational hand trap, but right now, I'm gonna be honest, I can see Bell finding its way into some main deck. I can see it, because the card is pretty good against Branded, good against Labyrinth. If you didn't know, the big welcome Labyrinth can summon from the graveyard, so the card is good there. It can hit Fountain against the Runic decks, which sometimes they can set up a Sprite Red negate beforehand or whatever, but sometimes it just works. Sometimes you can negate the draw 3. It's all right against a lot of the looking to be top decks, right? Maybe that even makes it good in the main deck. I'm not sure. I'm still gonna leave it at the very top of the second category, because it's Bell, right? It's not as versatile as Ash, but I do think there's a solid chance that Bell finds its way into some main decks, because it's looking to be solid. I'm not sure if it's better than the monster negations that we're looking at later, but it's solid. Bystials go kind of in the same vein. I think Bystials are going to be side deck mainstays in this format. Branded is a big deal. They are worse against Labyrinth than Bell, but they are still okay. They are also decent in some of the Runic matchups, like against Life Twins. They can have great impact. Of course, the cards are a lot better if you're playing a dragon deck yourself, like Dragon Link, then you're gonna play Bystials. But I think they have some really good potential to see some play. I don't know about main decking those. I think before I main deck Bystials, I'd probably main deck Bell, unless your deck has some inherent synergy with the Bystials, but they're all right. They're all right. I like them. Ghost Reaper, I don't see a huge use case for Ghost Reaper. I don't know. I don't think it's that great against the top tier decks. It's definitely bad against Labyrinth. I don't think it's great against the other decks as well. well. Maybe there's a use case against Branded, but Branded usually has other ways, alternative ways to play. If you cherries, like for example, Mirror Jade, I'm not sure if that's even good enough because they can bring it back into the extra deck with Lubel. I don't think Bell is that great. Crow goes into the decent category in my opinion. Crow has its uses in most matchups, but it doesn't really stop anything super important, right? You can use it against Labyrinth to stop the furnitures in the graveyard. You can use it against Runic to stop like a revive from the Furhires or a draw from Fountain, but only one. You can stop a Life Twin, but in that scenario, you would just rather have a Bestial. I think most of the time, Bell or Bestials just do the job better and more consistently than Crow, but it's not terrible. Droll and Lockbird, I think, is also situational. It got a lot worse. I personally don't think you should be maining Droll and Lockbird right now. In terms of the power of Droll and Lockbird, I think we're kind of back at the pre-Cyberstorm access point where the card was sometimes okay against decks like Kashtira or like even Branded. Sometimes against some Branded hands, Droll is really good. Sometimes it's really bad. The same goes for Runic decks, actually. Like, you know, you might think Runic decks are really weak to Droll, but honestly, if the Runic player is smart and uses like the Runic spells and the tip in the draw phase, maybe even the starter if they have it, yes, you will stop some of the amount of stuff that they can do, but they will still draw with Runics on your turn and stuff like that. I think it's not that great overall. It's not a very consistent hand trap. Also sucks against Labyrinth. I'm not a big fan of Droll, but you can play it in certain matchups. It's okay. Gamma is still included in here. The card is limited now. I think overall Gamma is now a mediocre card. Of course, the card still does the same thing, but the ratio you get for Gamma is just terrible, right? You have to play one Gamma, one Driver. That's just terrible. Maybe it's just bad. Don't play Gamma. Chaos Hunter as a hand trap is probably pretty bad. You can use it as Mannequin Cat target still. In that case, I think it's good, but as a hand trap, it's not very good. Let's talk about Effect Negation. Valor and Mourner and Imperm. Because I think Effect Negation is in an interesting spot this format. Kind of similar to, like I said, pre-Cyberstorm access. I think all three of those cards, Imperm, Valor, and Mourner, are playable, but I have one major issue with them, and that is the same issue that I had before Cyberstorm access release, and that is that most of the time, when I go second and I draw an Effect Negation hand trap, yes, they work, yes, they do something for me, but most of the time, I would rather have like a solid non-engine / board breaker card instead, because they do something, but their impact is kind of limited. I will put Imperm into the very good category and the other two in decent. They are definitely not situational because they are very consistent. You have to understand that situational, only because the tier is higher in this tier list, doesn't mean that situational is always better than, you know, these decent hand traps. Basically, what I mean by this is the decent hand traps, they are very consistently doing what they do, whereas the situational cards sometimes are a lot better than these, sometimes they are a lot worse. Right? These cards are always okay-ish, but I don't think they're ever like completely crazy. Unless you get very lucky, right? If you get very lucky, then your opponent just passes after Effect Valor, but it's not that likely. But yeah, Effect Negation is in an okay spot. Imperm, I think specifically, is better than the other two because it doesn't play into Talents, it doesn't play into Thrust, it can be drawn as the 6th card and negate something on your opponent's board. I think that's alright. Like, for example, your opponent goes into a Rise Hard, you draw into Imperm, you're fine. You just Imperm it. It's alright, you know? Lancea, long story short, I don't see a reason to play it. Nibiru, I'm kind of tempted to throw it in situational, but I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't even know which of the current expected decks really play into Nibiru. It's not great against Branded, even though sometimes they play into it. It's not good against Labyrinth. Kashtira with the new ban list, I think very often won't really commit into Nibiru, because really, what's the payoff? Without Diablosis, you don't really get anything out of committing into more summons. I think Kashtira most of the time should just go a Rise Hard pass, because that's what the deck does now. There is probably decks that play into it, which is why I'm gonna leave it at the very bottom of situational, but I don't expect to be playing this card, and I don't expect to be seeing this card a lot. It just feels wrong to put a card with the potential impact of Nibiru in the mediocre category, because for the matchups and the situations where it does resolve, it's still a very powerful card. I just don't think that the situations that Nibiru appears in or is good in, it's not going to be very often. Ghost Ogre, I think, had a very short time in the light in these last couple of weeks because it was a pretty good card against Super Heavy Samurai and Purely. Both of those decks are among the decks that take the most damage from the Forbidden and Limited list. Labyrinth card is pretty much dead. Branded card is pretty much dead. Kashtira card is pretty much dead. Runic decks, you can hit Fountain, but there's better ways to do it because they can protect it with Hugin. Just don't play Ghost Ogre. Shifter, if your deck can play Shifter, it's probably pretty good. I mean, it's like bad against Kashtira if people still play that. It's not completely dead against Labyrinth. Like if your deck doesn't care about it at all, Labyrinth cares about it a little bit. You know, their traps being banished, their furniture being banished sucks a little bit for them. So I think Shifter is good. If your deck can play it, you probably should. If people still play a lot of Kashtira, then maybe you want to side deck it. But I'm leaning towards if your deck can play Shifter, you probably should. Skullmeister, I don't see a reason to play it. And Retaliating Sea and Contact Sea, I think actually both are decent. I don't think you can ever main deck those cards, but if your deck wants to side deck those cards, they're okay. Contact Sea can hit Branded Fusion. It can hit runic spells that try to summon. It's a pretty okay card. And then Contact Sea is also pretty good against Branded. Even if they do play Sprint, you still prevent a better fusion from being summoned, right? They have to play suboptimally to get rid of the Contact Sea. They don't get Mirror Jade, instead they have a Sprint, you know? So that's something I can see happening. I can see those cards seeing some play. I think they are alright. In general, though, I think we are in a situation where I don't think decks want to be playing that many hand traps. Similar to before Cyberstorm Access, a lot of decks are going to want to play some amount of hand traps, but not that many, because I think there are not going to be that many Omni Negates, which is always a case where if there's not that many negations going around, you'd rather play Board Breakers than hand traps because they're usually more high impact cards. But that's the ranking on hand traps. Feel free to discuss in the comments down below, YouTube. And we're going to be moving on to recording the Board Breakers in a bit, so make sure to subscribe to the channel to not miss that. Hope you enjoyed the video and found it helpful for your preparations for the new format. Once again, keep in mind this is my first guess of the format and not more than that, so it's just an educated guess that I'm making. I hope it helps. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.